again, that whole experience of being dragged from doctor to doctor. Something was really seriously wrong. They thought I was dying. I ended up in a wheelchair for a while. And it was just devastating as a young mom because there were no answers. It was about 6.5 years that I had to deal with that. And then more recently, and if you know, this was more like a couple of years, but it still seemed like forever, even though it was only a couple of years, because you feel very trapped when you don't know what's wrong, you can't fix it, and it's just a frustrating, time-consuming, lonely experience. And yet, I have to tell you, each time God intervened on behalf, but each time it was a different way of doing it. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But 2 of the seasons of these medical issues, Brian was by my side when I was in my 20s and then fairly recently. Yet, as much as he wanted to make things better, I think it's wired in most men. They want to fix things. They want to make it right. He couldn't. And he had to have that helpless feeling of standing back and watch me journey alone as nobody's able to be there 24/7. And I will tell you, as I've talked to different people who've had to deal with issues like that, there are tears in the night. You just think, God, I can't do this. Like I need help. And sometimes it feels like the door is closed and nobody is listening. And nobody sees those tears because you try to put on at least a somewhat of a grimace during the day. But the one who still sees is God, because he never slumbers, he never sleeps. Other people do, but he doesn't. And he still sees it even when you feel like nobody else sees it. You know he does. Deep inside, you have to grab that. But that's why King David wrote in Psalms 23, verse 4, he says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." That term, valley of the shadow of death, it sounds very ominous, very like, what is that? Really what it is, yea, though I walk through a really, really hard place. And I think when you think of it that way, most of us can look to a point in time, or maybe we're going through it now, where you're walking through a really, really hard place. And you take comfort that when David said, "Yea, though I walk through a really, really hard place, I will fear no evil, for you," that is God, "are still with me." And if you read past that verse, he says, "And you comfort me." And it's the only thing that brings you through some of those times is when the comfort of God is there. And sometimes it feels like it's not there, but you look back and discover it was. He lessened the load, whether you realized it or not. But it dawned on me the other day that too many people relate to the story of the woman with the issue of blood as simply about Jesus' ability to heal physical problems. And as wonderful as that can be in the moment, because I have experienced that a number of times in my life, if you leave it at that level alone, the story stays one-dimensional. You never get past that point of what deeper is going on here. All of us have issues in our lives. I've pointed that out before. And we have to deal with. And frankly, many of our issues are much more complex than a physical one. You know, if you're hungry, here's something to eat. It's an easily fixed problem. There are problems the best minds in the world cannot fix because they're so complex. And so in trying to deal with these issues, you can end up feeling like you're running from doctor to doctor, trying to fix the problem, and yet finding yourself coming up empty, like you're beating your head against the wall. You're spending all your time and resources trying to find a solution, but things aren't getting better. And if anything, they feel like they're getting worse. You're physically alive, but inside, You feel dead. And no one knows except you and God. I wanted to share a story that starts at the beginning of Mark chapter 5 to just kind of maybe draw that picture out a little bit more when you're physically alive, but you feel dead inside. It's Mark chapter 5. I want to start at verse 2. And basically, the story opens up with Jesus and his disciples having traveled across the sea in a boat, and they're getting off on shore. So it's for us, modern day, we've traveled a long trip and we're getting out of the car, and this is what confronts. It says, when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs. Okay, tombs, it's a graveyard. We don't talk about tombs, but we can talk about graves. We understand that. That man was like a dead man walking. That's really what that was, is that to meet him, to meet Jesus. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore. No one could help him. Not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion." He replied, "For we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this to town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And it says after that, and they begged him to leave. That was always mind-boggling to me, that this particular community, when they saw such a miraculous thing happen, they begged him to leave. They were afraid. They were afraid of the power that was there. And so it says, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." People want to distance themselves from this story. It's very dramatic, but they can't relate personally because they say in their minds, "I'm not possessed." And if you only look at this story as a demon-possessed man being set free, and I assure you, it can happen, as I've personally witnessed this happening to others a few times in my life. But if you leave this only as a story about somebody that you can't relate to, you will only ever have this story as a one-dimensional story. It's so much deeper than about a man being set free of demons. It's frankly, in our lives, we all have things that torment and haunt us and we have to deal with. But I'm not diminishing the power that's there, but you need to look deeper than just about a man being set free of the demonic. Look at it closer. It says the man was living amongst the tombs, the graveyard, okay? As I said before, he was physically alive, but he was dead inside. You ever felt that way before? I have felt that way before. I can talk to people on the outside, but inside I'm numb and I really don't care. I hope I never let on to people that I don't care. But there have been times that I'm so numb inside, I don't have the ability to do it. Very empty feeling at times. And so you look at it, his life was out of control. He could not control what was happening, and nobody could help him. He was continually doing things to hurt himself. Have you ever seen someone that continually does things and you want to go up and say, well, if you just did this, this, and this, that wouldn't be a problem anymore? That's why I said to Brian, I wouldn't make a very good counselor, because that's what I would tend to do. He can't seem to stop the cycle of destruction. Just like I've seen other people, it's just a vicious cycle. It's that they do it over and over and over again because they're trapped. Yet when Jesus comes into the picture, things begin to rapidly change. Jesus goes right for the underlying issue, not working with the symptoms of the problem. He goes for the root of the problem, because if you deal with the root, the other stuff falls off. And once he deals with that underlying issue, he covers the man's nakedness. It says he was clothed and in his right mind. Well, those clothes had to come from Jesus. Here, Peter, give me your clothes, because that man was naked. They weren't lying in a pile beside him. Jesus clothed him, or said, guys, let's share up the clothes. He needs to be covered. So Jesus covers the man's nakedness, so he's no longer exposed to either judgmental eyes or shame. Did God not do that in the garden for Adam and Eve? They said, we're naked. And what does it say? He clothed them. They did it to themselves, but he clothed them anyway. That's what Jesus does. That's what we were singing this morning. He's a friend of sinners. He loves. He wants to cover us. He wants to make the difference in our lives. That man was able to re-enter society functioning as a whole person again. And what does Jesus say to him? He says, tell the people how much the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. I decided to look up what the word mercy means, because we all have our different versions of it. And I just thought, just go to the source of the dictionary. What does it mean, particularly for us today? I don't think the definition has changed a whole lot over the years, but it says mercy, the meaning of it is compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone who is within one's power to punish or harm. I'll repeat that. Mercy means compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. God has offered mercy for every one of us, not just in this room, but it says, for God so loved the world. He had the compassion for every one of us, the mercy offered to every one of us from the cross. He offers eternal freedom, but it's not just a decision for whether or not we want to spend eternity in heaven or hell. That's what people have kind of got that idea. As long as we take care of that, we're good. His compassion, his mercy, is that he wants to walk beside you now, helping you to deal with the issues that are holding you back on being all you can be in this life. Some people can say, but Pam, you don't know what I've done. You're right. I don't, and I don't need to know. But Jesus does know, and yet he doesn't do a preferential treatment. He has never done that, ever. He deals with people where they are at. Whether you've been to church for 30 years, you got saved all that time ago, whether you've never been to church before, you grew up in the church, you've lived the life of really awful stuff, he has never shown a preferential treatment. When you look at the man living in the graveyard, believe it or not, Jesus actually went out of his way to help him. You see, this man is a total social outcast. We can tell that. They've tied him down. They've done whatever, but he's running around loose, naked in the graveyard. People avoided him. They're scared of him. I would be too. Yet Jesus made a special trip to see him. He came by boat, and he knew that when he dealt with that man, the rest of the community would beg him to leave. So nothing more else was accomplished except to give that man back his life, and Jesus thought it was worthwhile coming across the lake for it. But he doesn't just limit himself to social outcasts. Because, that's one thing. I don't know if you guys are here, but I have a number of friends of mine that, I'm a good person. I don't do these thing and that thing. And they see that, if Jesus is needed, it's for the poor guy on the street who's a drug addict or, a homeless person or all the different things. They don't see that they have need of him too. But they do. Every one of us does. And so, as I said, he doesn't just limit himself to social outcasts. Right after dealing with this man, there's another man named Jairus that came looking for help. Most people would consider Jairus to be a good, upstanding citizen, faithfully attending church, and a very good dad. Jesus also had mercy on him, as Jairus' daughter was dying and nobody could fix the situation. It's the end of the line, up against the wall, and he's absolutely desperate for help. A few of us have been there as parents. I got nothing left. I need divine intervention or it's not going to make it. And Jesus was willing to help. Yet while he was journeying to Jairus' home, God's mercy was just as powerful and freeing to the woman who nobody else noticed. So remember, the disciples are like, what do you mean? Who touched you? Nobody was noticing this woman. But the God of all creation noticed her because he saw her heart. The woman with the issue of blood, the one who was slowly dying on the inside, and said, if I could just connect with Jesus, I know I will be better. I wouldn't want to do anyone a fast sell this morning on this because I have to admit, as a child in Sunday school, I had the impression from this story that if I just got in touch with Jesus, my problems would instantly vanish. Kind of like the genie in the bottle. Just do it, it's gone. I've found in the years since that this is a very childlike view on a complex world. I want to give you a reason for it. Remember when I said there were 3 times in my life that I had some significant medical issues to be dealt with? The first time in my teenage years, God restored my health in a very dramatic, miraculous way, very much like the woman's healing with touching Jesus' garment. Unexpected, outside of this organization. Matter of fact, the place where I went, they were still doing horse and buggies and long black skirts and everything else. And in my arrogance, as a teenager, I didn't realize that God could work outside of our organization, embarrassingly enough to say. But God showed up very powerfully. and I was instantly healed. The second time, and I was in my 20s, God restored my health with something that people don't like to hear, but He restored my health with a change of lifestyle, which was actually a very steep learning curve for me because I didn't grow up uh, understanding certain healthy lifestyle choices. And so that God, I believe, wanted me to learn for the rest of my life for making things better as I got older. But God also directed medical doctors to find an obscure problem. The only reason why I know that, about 2-3 years into my 6.5-year journey, I was just devastated inside because they were about to do another round of tests. And I thought, God, I can't do this again. I just can't do this again. And is one of the times that I have pretty well heard an audible voice. It was certainly audible in my head. God says, you don't have to worry this time. He says, I'm going to show the doctor what's wrong. Now, why he couldn't just zap it, that would have been nice. But he says, I'm going to show the doctor what's wrong. And within a week, the doctor knew it was a very obscure situation, and they were able to start a course of correction. But in the end, I still had to have a miraculous touch, sort of, I call it a mix, between the lifestyle change and God showing the doctors what was wrong, because the doctor intervention and the lifestyle change could alleviate the symptoms, but it couldn't cure the problem. And so again, God miraculously intervened, but it was 6.5 years before He did it. But He did establish some patterns that has been very helpful for not just me, but my children through our life because of the lifestyle changes that I made. The third time, I had as much passionate prayer as the first 2 times that God would intervene, God would do something. And there were tears in the night. There was the frustration, trap feeling, whatever else. But after months of prayer and medical appointments, and those medical appointments really seemed like dead ends, it was like God said now, and the Red Sea parted in the medical world, and to the shock of all of them, and I was diagnosed and dealt with within a week. It's like, okay, God, we could have done this like 2 years ago. I was like, no, there's some things that you needed to know. Looking back, as I said, I saw the hand of God in each of the situations, but the script played out differently in each case. And that's, again, realizing God can use many different ways for healing our bodies. But again, I'm going deeper than just about physical healing of bodies, because that's still temporary no matter what. Because if Jesus doesn't come before my time, it's going to be something else. It's kind of the way it works. But it's the same way when I talk about it deeper than just about the healing of our bodies. It's the same way when we ask God to help us deal with the issues of our lives. Remember, I said they're more complex than that. I asked Brian if I could share. I'm sure most of you have heard his story, know his story. I'm really hoping, believing that there are some people who listen into these tapes or sermons. I know are some people who do listen. But I asked him permission to share his story of how he became a follower of God. Before Brian became a Christian, he was messed up in a very bad way. Drugs, alcohol, addictions, cigarettes, they were literally destroying his life. He was like 20 years old and destroying his life. And he said he knew his family were very concerned for him. His friends years later could not believe he was still alive, let alone being a minister. They just couldn't get over that because they figured they were going to go to his funeral at some point. But in desperation, Brian cried out to God And like the woman with the issue of blood, when he connected with God, something dramatically changed in his life. Immediately, the drive towards drugs and alcohol left, and they never returned. He was never tempted by it again, even. But he did have to journey 2 years with God to break free of his addiction to cigarettes because they hadn't invented the patch back then. For anybody who's got to use the patch, he said he would have gladly done that. But God put him on a journey to break free of it. Both cases, whether it was instantaneous or it was a journey, God was there walking him through to freedom. And there's been other things. Those are just the outward things that people see, or, it's about destroying the body. It's that to take care of that. But Brian will tell you that God didn't stop there. He continued on the journey where he is today. Sometimes things are more dramatic in freedom. And we all like those times. I love it when just you're zapped and it's gone and you don't have to deal with it anymore. But sometimes it's more of walking with Jesus and having him help us walk to freedom. It's kind of like going to the local weight loss program. You want to lose the 100 pounds, but it's not going to happen overnight. But if you keep doing what you need to do, you will get the results that you desire. That's the way it works. That Jesus walking beside you, those weights will come off as long as you keep doing what he's telling you to do. And he will help you in areas that the miraculous that you can't do. How do I know that Jesus will have mercy on me? Like he did for the man in the graveyard, Jairus, and the woman with the issue of blood. That's a question. It's like God can do it for everybody else, but he can't do it for me. No, that's a lie. He can do it for everybody. Psalms 51, verse 17. It's a verse from the Old Testament, but it's one that's really important that people put deep down in their hearts for. It's New King James Version. Psalms 51, verse 17. It says, "The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise." But again, you look, what do you mean by a broken and a contrite heart? Looking it up, broken and a contrite heart means your natural pride is gone. You know how that pride is? You gotta try to keep the face, kind of hide behind it so that people don't know what's really going on. And it says, when that's gone between you and God, you're broken. You don't have any excuses anymore. You just say, yeah, I did it. Here I am. This is where I'm at, God. You're naked before God, and what's your cry? Please help. I have a little granddaughter that runs to me and shows something that she just broke. And she goes, "Fix it, Grandma, fix it." Unfortunately, I'm not God, and there's things I can't fix, but I try really hard. Sometimes I swap it out and let her think I fixed it. I know that's not totally right, but leave her image of Grandma being pretty amazing for a little while longer. God doesn't swap it out. He can fix it. He really can. Complex situations, he'll walk you through it. He has never turned anyone away who is desperate, like the woman with the issue of blood. His touch, whether it has a dramatic start or starts you on a journey to a freedom that you have been desperate for, it will happen. You just keep reaching out to him because he's full of mercy. And I will leave you with a final scripture to underline how full of mercy he is. So Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22 and 23. And I use the King James Version for this one. Again, it's just my upbringing. It brings me more comfort. But Lamentations 3, verse 22, 23. It's at a time when Israel has totally messed up, screwed up. Anybody else would throw them away. But the writer, Jeremiah, wrote this. He said, "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." You know what it says to me? Every day is a new day to begin again. Every morning, your mercies are renewed. Great is your faithfulness. Even when we're faithless, he is faithful.
Thanks, man. I hope there were people listening in, and hopefully those that weren't able to be here today, even if they couldn't tune in, that when that gets put up on the site, that people would pay attention to that, because there's things that, and I think the church, as I was sitting thinking about that and just taking that in, has been guilty of forgetting that God's mercies are new every morning. And we have a name, if you will, a reputation, sometimes earned, sometimes not always warranted, but that there's a lot of judgment in the church. And I don't know if you define mercy, maybe you did earlier on in the message, as one that when somebody has the power to punish, they choose rather to forgive. And if the church would remember that mercies are new every morning, there wouldn't be as much of that idea of punishment of sin and a lot more of forgiveness and healing. Because sin is not the ultimate thing that destroys lives, it's what it does to us. When we break relationships with God and with one another, that's what really damages us. Those emotional injuries go far deeper than the physical issues. A physical issue, it creates pain, it creates a lot of difficulty in limiting our ability to do things, even sometimes our ability to earn income. But ultimately, emotional pain and emotional damage can linger much, much longer, be much more devastating, can change us in ways that we would never have thought. And it goes on sometimes for years and even decades before a person actually even realizes that they have such deep emotional pain that it limits them in the same way that an illness limits us physically. But good message. Father, we thank you this morning. We thank you that you love us and that you care about our lives and about every part of our lives, and that you are available every morning. Your mercies are new. Every morning you forgive us if we will go to you. Lord, help us to have that broken and contrite heart that allows us to put our walls down and come to you for healing. Healing of our spiritual afflictions, healing of our emotional pain, healing of our physical bodies, and the things that affect our circumstances. And we thank you once again for all of that, for we know it is only through the power and the blood of Jesus. And in the name of Jesus, we are healed. Amen. Well, God bless you.